Come on, come here, come a little closer. Don't be afraid, no, I don't want to hurt you.
Today's guest is a woman whose life bridges generations of leadership in Rochester. Constance Mitchell Jefferson grew up in a home where equity was not theoretical. It was being negotiated in real time. As the daughter of Connie Mitchell, a civil rights pioneer who broke barriers in Monroe County government and helped establish action for a better community, she had a front row seat to what it means to stand firm when systems resist change. Later, Constance stepped into her own arena of authority, serving in procurement leadership for the city of Rochester, overseeing processes that determine how public dollars move, how contracts are awarded, and how access is structured across the local business ecosystem. That experience ultimately led to the formation of her consulting firm, Synequity. Her leadership has not been performative. It has been procedural, disciplined, consequential. Miss Constance, it's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Your story just, I'm never going to get through this podcast without crying. So I'm just going to throw that out there right now. Your story is absolutely incredible. And the day that you shared it with me, there was this fire that lit up inside my heart because I knew that you understand what it takes to create change from such a deeper perspective. So set the scene for us, Miss Constance. What did that look like in your home?
So growing up as the daughter of Connie Mitchell and having her name, and I was told having her face, growing up, in that environment, as a young child, I don't know that I completely understood why she was never home or why she was always gone or why there was always so many people around. But as I grew older, I understood it. I valued it. I looked at it as, I don't think I looked at it as a learning experience, but I used to kind of like sit in the corner when politicians and people would come to our house. I'd sit in a corner somewhere where they couldn't see me, and I just would listen. Yeah. And so I think that helped me to mature quicker because I was always thrown around a lot of adults. And our dinner table was just, a conversation. It was my parents having conversations back and forth about what's going on in the community, what information they were privy to, and just basically hearing these stories over and over so that when I went out in public and I saw these individuals, I could in my mind say, oh, I remember mom said this about that person or dad said this about that person, and I was able to kind of navigate that from a maturity perspective where a lot of my friends probably didn't. They weren't worried about politics. They weren't worried about what was going on in the community. But at an early age, I learned that I was a part of the community.
Yeah. And this was in the height of the civil rights movement?
Yeah. So, okay, not to age myself, but...
You look fabulous, darling. So
when my mom got into politics, I was very young. She first ran in 1959, and I was only 2 years old. And then she won. She ran... and she lost. And then she ran again in 1961 and she won. And I was 4 years old. And so throughout the years and by the time July 1964 rolled around and the upheaval and unrest in Rochester was happening, I was old enough to kind of know that something was going on because it was very chaotic and all of that. But I still was young enough to not know what was going on or that my parents, I felt, were kind of sheltering me, only because I was their child and they felt that if people were going to retaliate against them, they were, and the stance that they were trying to take to be the peacemakers and be the neutralizers and all of that, that they could use me in that. And so consequently, my grandmother and my aunts, they became very important to me because they helped to raise me while my parents were out being the change makers.
I love that extended family. It's like, I want to come back to that more and more all the time because it's beautiful and it allows people to be able to do those things while you're keeping your kid right within the family unit. But you kind of described this, watching your parents really advocating for change and really advocating for progress. And we know that during that time, there was some backlash for sure. So I wonder, how did that shape your perspective of progress and as it relates to courage?
Definitely, I didn't realize it had given me courage until many years later. And I reflected back on things that happened when I was a child. And I had those aha moments.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, okay, that's why I feel that way, or that's why I react this way maybe now and stuff, And it has been a lot of thinking backwards and a lot of reflecting. And still to this very day, I'll see something, or I live in Cornhill, and I'll go through the Cornhill neighborhood where I grew up, and I'll see a building or something, and a thought will come back to me about a meeting I sat in with my mom, or somebody that I met at that location or something. But for me, I learned courage, I think, early on. There was a time in the 60s, mid to late 60s, where our house we would receive bomb threats every day, I guess, And so I'd leave and go to bed in my own bed, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be in my grandmother's bed. And I'm like, how did I get here? And, what happened during the night that I was brought here or whatever? And I remember overhearing a somewhat heated conversation one time between my parents, and my father was saying, was venting his frustration about having to always pick me up and take me out in the middle of the night. And he was tired of people calling the house, with these idle threats and stuff. And I remember my mom saying, yes, John, but the one time we ignore it could be the time they bomb our house, and then that's our child too, And so I heard that, and it was like,
yeah.
I didn't say anything about it for the longest time. And then about a year or two later after that, there was the bombing of the Birmingham church.
Yeah.
And I came home and my mom was in the house just crying and crying. And I said, who died?
Yeah.
Because whenever you see people crying, you think somebody has died, right? She said, the little girls. And I looked at the TV screen and I saw a reflection of myself. I saw little black girls with big baggy bangs and big floppy bangs and pigtails. And that could have been me, Yeah. That was how I looked. And so I said to my mom, I said, could that happen to me? Because you said the people are trying to bomb our house, and my mom and dad kind of looked at each other and were like, about that. And they had to kind of sit me down and explain that, we've got you. Nothing's going to happen to you. This is why you always wake up at grandma's house, that sort of thing. So I think that I learned some kind of fortitude and courage, at that early age that kind of went with me throughout my adulthood. And it wasn't until probably my early 20s that I realized that I had a lot of chutzpah.
Yeah, girl.
And spunk.
Yeah, you do. I love all of it. I love all of it, for the record. That is nothing short of a traumatizing experience for a child, and it's ongoing as well. So now from a psychological perspective, which of course is my love, we're talking about a complex trauma because this is happening over an extended period of time. And as a parent, I just think about what your parents were facing in that moment and really wanting to protect you from that knowledge and the challenges that also came with it, because to them, I'm sure, it's much like probably how I feel about women's issues today. It's like this, no, for me, it's like this is a cause worth dying for. Like that's how I feel. So there's such a beautiful lesson in that, but that's not to negate the impact, and that impact was not obviously on behalf of your parents. It's on behalf of the way the world was at that time. But I just wonder for you, like, was there ever this tension between wanting maybe a normal childhood or to not wake up at grandma's house in the morning and carrying this public name and beautiful public face?
I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me when I was growing up, because I think that every young person wants to have their own identity, and every young person wants to be able to be grown before their time, and every young person has a certain amount of rebelliousness about them, especially when you're like 13, 14 years old and everything. And so when you see your friends being able to go places and do things that you're not able to go to and you're not able to do because of whose child you are, or because of what your name is, or because of what your background is, or whatever, that can be like, that's not fair. Why? How come me? That sort of thing. But I think that, and I think when I decided to go to college, that's why I chose to go to college out of state and everything, was because I wanted to go somewhere where I could be known as me, not as Connie Mitchell's daughter. And that wasn't a negative to her. It was just me searching, I think, for my own identity at that time. But ironically, after my first year of college, my mom ran for city council. She lost, but that was an example of courage and everything too. Watching her go through a campaign. Pretty much for the first time, because I was too young when she campaigned the first time around, and seeing her run a campaign and be a candidate for city council, and listening to her, do speeches and things of that nature. There was a certain amount of admiration there. I was like, how does she do this? She just makes this look so easy. Like, how is she talking to all of these people and answering all these questions, and has that poise and that grace, And so it was a learning experience for me. And then when she did not win that race, I was very upset, because the election was stolen from her. They said that she lost by 2 or 3 votes. And, when we inquired and said, well, how many absentee ballots were there? Oh, there were no absentee ballots. Well, how could that be? I was in college. My cousins are all in college, and we all voted absentee ballot. But so that showed me something there. I was like, okay, there's not always fairness in life. But I saw how she handled it. And as a consequence of not winning that race, she was able to go on and do some phenomenal things and take on some leadership roles. She was given the opportunity to become the founding director of a program called PRISM, which was a program to interest Rochester students in science and math. It was a pre-college program. And because of her affiliation with that, she was able to become a national leader, because she became the chair of the National Association for Pre-College Directors. She became the chair for the National Action Council for Minority Engineers. So she had an opportunity to take on a different type of leadership that she wouldn't have gotten had she won that position for city council. She would have been very limited in that. So, I always say, so that taught me that good things can come out of bad situations, and it also taught me that early on, what the meaning of "I can show you better than I can tell you" means. Oh, you don't want one? Okay, I'm gonna show you.
Yep.
You know, that's a thing. And so I think that was when I first started getting that fire in me. That I know I want to do something that is going to impact the greater good. I don't know what that is, but I know that I want to do something that's going to impact the greater good, and that is going to be able to take on, you know, at that time there wasn't the word equity. But I wanted to just do things that were going to be fair and equitable. I wanted to make a difference doing that. And so here I am years later, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
I love that your parents were these like incredible trailblazers from a perspective of definitely culture and certainly the beginning stages of policy. And then you grabbed that torch and you went into government and you pushed it forward, and you did it in such a meaningful way. When we think about equity, you know, there's lots of people that don't really understand some of the systemic barriers, and you've talked about some of them today. And the access, right? Just the access, just the opportunity and the difference that it can make in people's lives. So what does equity look like when it becomes a contract or a process?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me backtrack a little bit, because one of the things that you said when you introduced me was that my leadership has been consequential. So I do believe that if you are working in the arena of equity and looking at life and business from an equity lens, there are consequences. There are consequences for you as an individual because you're taking a stand that may not necessarily be popular, but you're taking a stand. And it's also, it's a time where you have to have a thick skin because you're not always going to be giving the popular way of thinking, you know, particularly when you are a woman doing business in a male-dominated arena of construction and engineering and all of those things. But then also, you know, when you're a woman in politics, working, or not in politics, but a woman working in government. And I was fortunate in that I happened to be in the right place at the right time and meet the right people to be able to get into government. My father, as I was growing up, he wanted me to do two things. He wanted me to become a lawyer, and he wanted me to work in government. And I said, neither one.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. You know, only because I saw what my mom went through. I saw what other politicians had gone through. And I said, I never want to be a politician. But one of the things that I quickly realized was that to work in government, you don't have to be a politician. So you associate yourself with politicians, but you don't have to be a politician. So that was something that once I kind of realized that, I could always work on campaigns and things. When I was in college, one of my, other than my mom's campaign, one of the first campaigns I ever worked on was for the mayor of New Orleans. I went to school at Xavier University in New Orleans, and it was for Landrew, when he was running, Ernest Morial, when he was running for mayor. He was going to be the first African-American mayor of New Orleans. And so, you know, I went to school down there and I got actively involved in his campaign, you know, and then I would come home and campaign for my mom, you know. So I saw that I could work in politics, that I enjoyed working in politics. I enjoyed knowing what was going on in the community and hearing it from different perspectives and things. So that was, I think, the part that interested me in going to work in government. Second was I was made an offer to go into city government, and I had never worked in government before. I had worked in nonprofit. I had worked in profit. I felt as though, you know, okay, I worked in in and around academia. So I was like, okay, well, government is the only way I haven't been. So let me go in here and see what this is about. And I was appointed the MWBE officer for the city of Rochester by Lovely Warren when she came into office. And she said, I want you to come in and I just want you to, look at this MWBE process and I want you to, let me know what you think about it, And so I came in and the first thing I said was, I know nothing about construction, right? She's like, you're a quick study, you'll learn. So
sounds like lovely.
I came in and I there are people that, I was able to attach myself to. One was Norman Jones, who was at that time the commissioner for the Department of Environmental Services. And I said, hey, you know what? I need to learn everything I can. I need a crash course in construction. I need to understand what I'm reading because I'm reading all these specs and everything. And then MWBE was located in purchasing. So that's kind of how I got into procurement. I never went to school thinking I was going to, grow up and become the purchasing agent for a major municipality. Could nobody have ever told me that? I was so far moving in the opposite direction from that. It really was. But when I got into it and I was asked to take on this MWBE thing, the one thing that I found was that as a woman, I was very interested in making sure that women had opportunities. As a person of color, I was very interested in making sure that people of color had opportunities. As a taxpayer in the city of Rochester, I was very interested in making sure that people that look like me had an opportunity to do business with the city. And I didn't like what I saw when I came in. Yeah. And I looked at that MWBE process and I took about 8 months to really learn. In municipal government, there's 3 P's that you kind of dictate your life. And that is policy, procedure, and protocol.
Got it.
And so I came in and I wanted to learn, okay, how do the systems work and how does this interact? How does purchasing interact with finance, and how does purchasing interact with engineering, and how does this all fit together? And what's in between this? What are all these construction terms, and what does all of this mean? So coming into that, I had to be a real quick study, first of all. Yeah. And then secondly, I had to learn that the system itself was broken because systemically, the city of Rochester had been run by people that didn't look like me.
Yeah.
It had been run by a lot of males. It had been run by a lot of people who didn't understand equity, that didn't understand the concept of community, investing in the community.
Yeah.
Even though they work for government, it was weird that I thought that's the one thing, they don't understand this. And so it was good that I was working under a mayor that came in and that came from that kind of background, that wanted to say, we are going to reinvest in the community.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the direction I went in when I first started working in this whole government arena.
And I might just add, when you got your hands on our MWBE department, it wasn't, I'll just tell you from an outside looking in, it wasn't much of anything.
It had been doing it for 25 years. And in the 25 years that they were doing it, I looked back at the stats and the numbers, and they weren't, I didn't like the story they were telling me. And then I was like, okay, so there has to be a reason why MWBE is in purchasing. There has to be a reason why purchasing is within the finance department. And there has to be a reason why how procurement can play a role in turning this all around. Yes. And so once I understood each of those 3 components, I was able to then say, aha. And then the whole concept of supplier diversity came into being. And what does that mean? And but again, looking at it from an equity lens. And when you're taking equity in practice and in theory to a concept, a direction, a directive, and you're building a case for that. With that comes a lot of redirecting allocations of money.
Yeah.
It comes with redirecting how you, the authority behind it.
Yeah.
It just really changes, and it has a system of you have to develop a system of accountability with it. You can't just say, okay, we're going to do this, and then you don't do it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to do this, but then you don't do it. But I also knew that because of what the content was, because it was equity, and because we were working in an arena where you would have non-minority and non-women-owned firms that you had to deal with on a day-to-day basis, it had to be something that they would embrace and understand as well. So, I kept going back and forth. I started investigating different, avenues of equity across the United States to see what was going on. And then one day I was sitting at my desk and I got this email from New York State, and it talked about Article 15A, which is the whole premise around the MWBE legislation for the state. Mm-hmm. And it said that it was based upon 4 areas. And a light bulb went off. And I'm like, I'm looking for all these models. We got a model right here in New York State, And so I was able to develop a model for procurement around equity that consisted of construction, professional services within the construction arena. It dealt with professional services, whether that be, lawyers, educators, whatever, HR people, whatever. And it talked about commodities, goods, and services. Well, that's the procurement side. So I said, okay, these are the 4 components that make up Article 15A. Why don't I develop a model for the city of Rochester around that? And it does several things. At that time, you used to have to do these big studies and pay $500,000 or more for these big equity studies and all of that. And because the data that New York State has was inclusive of the Finger Lakes region, I was like, well, seems to me we don't have to do a disparity study because the state does a disparity study at that time it was every 3 years. Now it's every 5 years. Okay. And so why should we reinvent the wheel and spend all this money to do what New York State has already done? We just take their data and we build upon that. And so everybody was like, okay. And my legal department was like, okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, and being that the mayor at that time was an attorney, she was like, sounds good to me. So, that's how I think we were able to begin to build on that.
Yeah.
But the first thing I did was I went out and I met with every single constituency group. I met with the M's, I met with the W's, I met with the prime contractors, I met with the architectural firms, I met with the engineering firms, and I just explained to them what I was trying to create.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that we were trying to reinvent the wheel. We were just trying to make the wheel a lot more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, and you did, because if I could just add here, shameless plug for Miss Constance, but truly, like I've been doing supplier diversity work nationally for almost a decade, and in upstate New York. So yes, minus New York City, Rochester is very well known and honored and respected for having the most progressive, innovative, and effective supplier diversity program in the entire state, and that was birthed through your vision. So I can't commend you enough. And, when I think about all of this type of work, my work certainly still focused on diversity. My heart, as you know, is with women. And I too, come into these moments where not the most popular opinion in the room, right? Maybe we don't want to have this conversation. I've got a topic right now that I'm like, ooh, man, like when I dive into this one, it's really going to ruffle some feathers, but it has to be discussed. And for you, like, as you've been doing this, what does integrity cost? Like when we think about these roles where no one is necessarily applauding, you know, how do you, I know for me, sometimes I'm like, oh man, should I just shut up? You know, like everybody's like, Stephanie, enough, right? But I'm like, no, it's not enough because we have not solved the problem yet. And until we've solved the problem, it's not nearly enough. So please, Auntie, please help me and everybody else listening. When we're facing these things where it's not maybe what people want to hear. And to your point, when we're talking about supplier diversity, what that actually looks like in action, typically, I'm going to say it plain. You said it very politically correct. And I appreciate you for that. But what it looks like in action is it's white men typically that are giving up revenue. And that ruffles some feathers. And what you have to do is you have to present it in a way that you are showing people that they're not giving up anything. Ooh, okay. Preach. Go ahead.
You have to give it. You do. You have to present it in a way that people understand that you are as strong as your weakest link.
Ooh.
And if your community is to be strong, then everybody has to have an equal part to play in it, and everybody needs to be able to also be able to benefit from it. Or else you're going to continue to have poverty. You're going to continue to have a lack of generational wealth. You're going to continue to have people being held down because people want to. Because they're making it about money, and it's not about money all the time. They make it about money. They make it about money, but it's not about money. It is about doing what is right. It's about letting everybody have that American dream. It's about letting everybody have that opportunity. And so, yeah, that's not always easy to present, you know, to people. But if you place accountability with it, and then with that accountability comes legislation around it. You have to, you know, is what they say. You have to put up a shut up. You gotta build a complete system, and that system says accountability. So, okay, prime contractor, I hire you to do a job for the city of Rochester. In return, I'm asking that you give 30% of your contract to minority and women, and that And I remember one time a prime contractor saying to me, it's like you're trying to tell us who we have to work with. I said, oh, no, I'm not telling you who you have to work with. I'm telling you what you need to do in order to work for us. You know, you choose whoever you want to work for you. I'll tell you that. But I will tell you that in order for you to have this contract, these are our requirements. So to whom much is given, much is expected.
That's right.
You know, and I think that was the biggest turnaround. I think that culturally, that was the biggest turnaround, I think, for a lot of the construction companies in the Rochester area, was that the city was now holding them accountable.
Yeah.
I even took it even further. After I developed the process, I went out and found the tools that I needed to be able to increase that accountability. So I came up with a compliance program for accounting purposes, where certified payrolls could come in, and, you know, I'd ask you, Stephanie, who are you paying out of this pay app? And you'd say, I'm paying A, B, and C. And then in return, I send A, B, and C a letter 2 weeks after you have received a check from the city saying, did Constance pay you? And if you say no, you know, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
We have a problem. And so they were like, oh, well, yeah, we ran short of money, or we were going to pay them, or we're intending to pay them. And I'd be like, okay, just understand that the next pay app you're getting ready to submit will not be approved until I have proof that you've paid these people. So what that did was that brought accountability back to the table, and it said, you're not, you know, the city has a fiduciary responsibility with you, because you are a prime contractor that's working for us. But in addition, from an equity perspective, we also have to be concerned about the fiduciary responsibility to our subcontractors as well. You know, and that was a turnaround, and that was a hard one for me to sell in city government, because for so long they were like, our relationship is with the prime contractor, and I'm like, no, your relationship is with everybody that works on that job to ensure that they're working for us,
right?
You know, they're doing a job. We need to ensure that they're getting paid, even though they're not getting paid by us. It's our responsibility to make sure they're getting paid, you know? And so it was things like that, you know? And so you asked me about integrity. For me, integrity is committing yourself to something, holding yourself and others accountable, and ensuring that it's fair. You know, in procurement, we use the terms fair, objective, and impartial, and, you know, that how it is perceived is not perceived that it's favoritism in any way, you know, or anything like that. So if we're using those words, and then when you submit any bid to anybody, the bid always says, we're going to choose the bid that is the most responsible, you know, and all of that, you know, and is the lowest responsible bid.
Yeah.
Well, it's not low because you wanted to lowball and get the contract, and then you're going to raise the prices afterwards. You know, it's fair and equitable. Yeah. You know, and one of the things that I tried to convey to MWBE businesses was to have integrity in business. If you are a trucking company and you're going after a job, and you say, I take this job, I need 12 trucks, but I only got 7 in my arsenal. I'll get another 5 from somebody else, you know, when the job comes. And then the time comes and you haven't been able to secure those other 5 because those other trucking firms are busy. Now your integrity's on the line. You've committed yourself to something. They've put you in the budget. They've planned for you to be there. And now you can't fulfill that. So what that does is that ruins your reputation. That lowers, you know, your you know, how people see you from an integrity perspective, because they think you're a liar because you did lie. Right. Right. You know? So you know, for me, being in an arena where you are trying to get people to do that cultural switch and change over from the way they're used to doing business to a different way of doing business, you have to also be principled. You also have to be that person. Yeah. You know, and my thing is, I'm going to choose this. I made a commitment a long time ago in business that I was always going, and in life, that I was always going to go with what was right rather than what was popular. It's
a powerful choice. It makes for definitely a little bit of a bumpy ride, but it is such a powerful choice. And, you know, like as you're talking, I can't help but think about we're in this, at least nationally, but possibly globally, right? We're in this conversation about wealth inequality. And we're in this conversation of like, no, it quite literally can't go any further. Like we have stretched capitalism as far as we can stretch it. And the way that we dispersed it was inequitable. And as a result, now we have this huge wealth gap, right? We have this huge income disparity that we're seeing across the board that's affecting more than just women and people of color now. But that was where it really originated. And I remember, you know, doing this work at a national level, specifically, you know, in the healthcare field, particularly. And when you look at the research, the truth is, and I'm sure you know this, but the research shows that the more that women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses are patronized, the more jobs that are created in the local community, the higher the household income is. Like it literally raises itself. I mean, this country, and particularly the city of Rochester, is very huge in procurement. In small business, and I think that that's something that we should be proud of because we embrace small business. Small businesses built
the country.
Right.
And so we need to kind of go back to that. And all these big businesses are closing down because they become so globalized that, they forgot about, they're caring more about the dollars and cents instead of the people side of it. But the people side of it is what keeps the organization growing, moving, and existing. But they've moved away from that. So like you said, we've stretched capitalism about as far as we can. And it's not that I'm going to socialist or I'm trying to become a socialist or fascist or anything like that. I'm just saying that when you're moving equity from procurement and, in procurement to a contracting stage, you kind of have to you have to stop letting choices be optional. And you have to get to a point where it becomes a condition on doing business. You got to take a stand, and I had someone from New York State ask me a question recently. They said, when you were at the city of Rochester, how did you enforce payments? I said I didn't give them an option.
It wasn't a choice.
It wasn't a choice. It was like, you're going to pay these people or you're not going to get paid.
Yeah.
It's that simple, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah.
You're going to treat people the way you want to be treated, and since you want to get paid, they want to get paid too,
Right.
So that was one thing. The other thing is that you have to be willing to reallocate those resources in a way that makes sense. You can't just stick to a model because that's the model you've been doing forever, and you can't stick to homogeneity, and you can't stick to, you gotta put a little bit of mix in there. And this whole conversation around DEI right now, to me, has nothing to do with equity. It has a whole hell of a lot to do with diversity. Because when you have that conversation with certain folks, the first thing they say, well, diversity, is this and diversity is that, and inclusion, is this and inclusion is that, da, 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 da. They never say a lot about equity. And to me, if you look at the definition of equity, equity is a return on investment.
Yeah. That's
so if you look at it, if you look at equity as a return on investment, you got to make an investment into people if your community is going to survive.
Yeah.
And that's when I started my consulting company. That was one of the things I was like, okay, I got to find a name. How do I do this thing? For me, I'm all about collaboration. I'm all about not reinventing the wheel. I'm all about how do we readjust the wheel so that it moves better and all of that, And that's, I think, part of being a change manager is when you say, I want to be a change management person or I want to be a change agent, you have to look at what do you need to tweak in order for that change to occur. Yeah. You can't put in the same thing and expect to get something different out.
That's right.
I'm sorry. It don't work that way,
It's so true. And as I reflect on not just your journey, but the journey that came before yours through your mother and your father and you getting to your retirement at the city of Rochester last year and now going to take this work far beyond Rochester's walls, the impact that you have made and the legacy that you have created and the legacy that your mother and father leaves, your fingerprints are just all over Rochester and making our future a little bit brighter. And you have nailed it. You have nailed it. You have knocked it out of the park. You've set the bar so high. And I do wonder, as we wrap up for today, what unfinished work from your mother's legacy still feels present for you?
I think there is a lot. And I guess, I don't know if everyone has seen the movie or the documentary July 64. No, but in that documentary, Minister Franklin Florence made a statement and he said, in 1964, the issues were housing, education, and jobs. And that's what we fought for. That's what we wanted. That's what we were trying to change. That was what we were trying to improve. That's what, that was our directive. I think when I look at where we are now in 2026, it's a shame to say, but those are still the same things that we're working towards. So if there was anything that my mom left undone, or that Minister Florence and that whole generation of change agents left undone, it is that we still do not have equity in housing. We still do not have equity in education, and we still do not have equity in our economy. And we've got to make sure that if we do nothing else, is that we recognize that equity is not a curse word. It's an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And if we don't embrace it, we lose it. And the communities are going to continue to struggle. So as I move forward in my consulting work, the one thing that I'm trying to do is I'm going to these municipalities in upstate New York, and I'm saying, have you thought about it from this perspective, or have you thought about it from that perspective? And yes, I've had a couple of municipalities say, well, the federal government is saying. I said, yes, but you are in New York State. You're not getting those federal dollars. You're getting state dollars. And in this state, as far as I know, MWBE, diversity, and equity are still embraced.
That's right.
So, stop going after the big pots of money. Go after the smaller pots of money and do amazing things with those so that you set the stage to get those larger pots of money. Yes.
Yes. Well, Miss Constance, it is such an honor, truly, to have you here today. And here I go. But just to hear how you see the world and what your experience has been and what shaped these decisions and how you led through these moments, because these were the opposite of easy moments, some of the most challenging in our recent history. And you're absolutely right in that march continues on. I am so grateful,
Thank you.
for what you've done here in Rochester, but B, for what you are going to do in the communities that you go on to serve through Synequity. And I'm so grateful to be in your sphere where I can get a front row seat. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Good conversation.
Yes, ma'am. All right, Scott, we'll wrap it up there. And then I'm going to do a quick casual round with you, just like 3 minutes. Just more things about like who you are as a person. And Scott will come in and snap a couple pictures for us, and I'll let you get back to your afternoon.
Sure.
But
how do you think I did?
Oh, it was amazing.
Good.
It was friggin' brilliant. It always is. Like we get into it and I'm like, oh yeah, like right in the middle there when you're talking about equity and like the impacts of it and even the change making, like especially right now, right? There's so, it's a mess, girl.
It is. And I've been taking some online courses and stuff like that with on this new DBE recertification process. Mm-hmm. It's so sad.
Another mess.
And so, one of the things I said to the consultant on the call that I was on recently, I said, maybe it's me. I'm just don't get it. But first of all, the whole premise was to make the language race neutral. Mm-hmm. But in the process of making it race neutral, you've made it gender neutral. Mm. And you're telling people to justify how they have been disadvantaged. Mm.
Yeah.
And so has the whole concept of DBE changed? Right. Because as far as I know and everything I learned is that a disadvantaged business enterprise was a business that we didn't consider ethnicity. Yeah. We didn't consider gender. Mm-hmm. We considered economics and how you are economically disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. So that meant that a white woman, a white man, a Chinese person, whomever could come in, and as long as they could prove that they had been economically disadvantaged, they could get it. So why are you putting the emphasis on driving the language that it can't be gender, it can't be race, it can't be ethnicity? Why are you driving that home when that's what has always been understood? But it's like now you're enforcing that. And like I said, it's this DEI thing has nothing to do with equity. It has a whole hell of a lot to do with diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And their perception of it being a Black thing, a color thing. No. If you look at the term diverse in the dictionary, it says variation.
Right. Yes.
You know?
Yep.
And you cannot, and here's what I tell people, all colors in the spectrum start with white.
Yep.
They start with the color white.
Yeah.
And it builds on from there.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, and so it's like it builds on from there. But that's how you get those other colors, you know, and that spectrum of that rainbow. And that's why when I used to do this diversity work years ago, I used to tell white males in corporate America, they'd say, well, you know, what you going to do with a white guy like me? And I said, use you. Because, again, you're part of the diversity mix. There is no diversity without white males.
That's so beautiful. You know, like, I know we're done with the podcast, but like what you had said just about making them a part of the solution and so that they're not losing anything. And as I'm having this conversation about men and women and masculine and feminine and what does that look like in leadership, I am feeling that resistance, like from a lot of the men, is like to admit that it would be good to have more women in leadership would mean that they would have to say that it would be good to have less of them, right? But it gets me thinking about it from a whole new perspective of like, because I believe this in my heart and soul. I think men are also suffering from a lack of feminine energy around them. They're suffering from not having compassion and empathy around them. They're suffering from that too. They're human beings too. And they're masculine and feminine too, right? They got a mommy and they know how it feels when mommy gives them that love. Like we all want that.
But if you look even at the political arena right now, Stephanie, and you look at Congress, and you look at the Senate, and you look at and even if you look at New York State government, the people that are in the decision-making roles that are being change agents within that are mostly women. Or people of color.
Or both.
You know, and you know, and so I'm like, okay. You know, and that just is like we just gotta look at that. We gotta look at that, and we gotta ask, and we gotta question why.
Yeah,
you know, because we're the groups that have received the most backlash and are, you know, have been downtrodden so long. We're like, hello, no,
enough.
We ain't going backwards.
Right. We have the most to lose, right? I mean, the truth is for most white males, and I wouldn't say they're all this way, but for most of them, it's like, what do they have to lose in this? Like, they don't have a lot. But for us, it's like, no, I have a lot to lose here, and I am losing a lot. So,
well, you know, it's one of the things that has come out to me since I retired now is I've seen, you know, some of the union guys and people that I worked with when I was at the city and stuff. And they were like, oh my God, Constance, please tell us you're coming back to the city. Everything is so different now that you're gone and stuff. And they said, you know, you gave us a hard way to go. Boy, I tell you, you were like cracking that whip. But you were tough, but you were fair. And that's what I'm saying. It becomes a point of accountability, systems of accountability. You can't just change one part of the matrix and think that it's all going to be good.
That's right.
You got to change all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And the hardest part is changing the mentality.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah, because we've got generations and generations. And not just that, but even the conditioning, right? Like just the conditioning that we live in most of the time we're not even aware of and how it's shaping our perceptions and our behavior. But I want to be like you when I grow up.
You know, that's a hard sell. I mean, I'm not going to tell people that, you know, this consulting company that I have here is... And I don't know if it's going to be successful. I hope it will be, because I'm going in and I'm just being me, you know, and I'm being honest with folk, you know, and, you know, I'm not worried about if you're the mayor, if I'm talking to a mayor. I'm not worried about stroking your ego. I'm here to give you my perspective on how I see your city as an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
And you can't, and if I'm telling you that, who's not telling you that and holding it against you?
Well, I'll tell you, I think
that's what I said to the mayor of Niagara Falls. I said, you know, I'm going to tell you what I see. You may not like what I have to say, but I'm not here to offend you. I'm not here to alienate you. I'm here to speak truth.
Yeah.
And I said, and if I tell you how I feel or how I see your city from an outside perspective looking in, how many organizations like the state of New York are looking at you the same way, but they're not telling you, but they're holding it against you?
Yeah.
I'd rather tell you. You get a little pissed off at me.
Right. Yeah, get over it.
You know, I said, but he said, so what is your hope to accomplish? I said, for lack of another word, to help you get out of your own way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the work that you're doing, you're just ahead of your time. I think when we get to the other side of whatever this is going to be at a federal level, hard to predict that, pretty messy, but I think there's enough people at this point that have seen just the way that we have done it up till now. It just doesn't work. Like there's really no arguing that. That is just facts. That is just data. That is just math. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have to construct what does the new society looks like when we get to the other side of this. And your framework, your philosophy, your approach, like I believe that's what needs to guide us into the next way of doing things, because equity has to be part of the conversation. That is the biggest issue that we have right now, is the absolute extreme wealth inequality. It's created so many issues that it's going to take us a long time to kind of resolve.
And I think it needs to happen grassroots. That's why I'm concentrating on working with municipal governments, because I think it's going to be a grassroots change that has to happen. I think communities need to change the way they think. They need to change the way they do business, and they need to become a little bit more centered around their constituency. You know, because I think a lot of times what happens is people look at people that would vote for them and say, okay, I'm going to, and our society right now is so divisive. Yeah. So if you are a politician today and you're going in there with the mindset, oh, I'm going to do this for all the citizens, you know, when half the citizens didn't even vote for you. Right. You know what I'm saying? That is like an oxymoron, please. You know? Come on. It's like, it don't make no sense, right. You know? But if you go in there saying, I am going to come in as a change agent, I'm going to take the people that are going with me, and I'm going to make an attempt to change 50% of the people that didn't go with me. You're not trying to change 100% because you're never going to do that. That's unrealistic. But if you can say I'm going to change a certain percentage of the folks that didn't and convert them, guess what? They're going to do the work for the other 50%.
See, this is the wisdom I'm talking about.